My own son-in-law stood in my bedroom doorway wearing my bathrobe, and I knew right then that everything I'd built over 37 years was about to crumble. The name's Walt Patterson. I'm 62 years old, and I'd just walked into a situation that would test every ounce of strength I had left in my body. Well, well, Harold Patterson smirked, adjusting the terry cloth belt around his waist. Look who finally decided to come home. I stood there in my own hallway, duffel bag in one hand, gifts for my grandkids in the other, staring at this 69-year-old parasite wearing my clothes in my house like he owned the place. Behind him, I could see my king-size bed unmade, my dresser covered with his prescription bottles, my master bathroom with his dentures soaking in a cup on my sink. "Where's Kevin?" My voice came out steady, though my blood pressure was spiking like a rocket. "Getting your daughter to make me breakfast." Harold's grin widened. Boy knows how to treat his father right. Unlike some people. That's when Kevin appeared, sliding past his father with this smug expression I'd grown to hate over the past 5 years. My son-in-law looked me up and down, like I was some vagrant who'd wandered in off the street. "Walt, you're back early." No greeting, no explanation, just that flat acknowledgement like my presence was an inconvenience. "Early from what?" "I told Sarah I'd be home today from the VA hospital." Kevin shrugged. "Things change. We had to make some adjustments while you were gone." "Adjustments?" I set down the gift bags carefully, keeping my hands free. 37 years of construction work and 8 years in the Army taught you to stay ready for anything. "What kind of adjustments?" "Dad needed a place to stay. This room has the best space, the private bathroom. Made sense." Harold chuckled behind him. "Don't look so shocked, old man. It's called adapting to new circumstances." I walked past both of them into my own bedroom, surveying the damage. Harold had completely taken over, his clothes hanging in my closet, his medications covering my nightstand, his reading glasses on my bedside table. The smell of his cheap cologne had replaced the faint scent of my late wife's perfume that I'd never quite been able to wash out of the fabric. "Where are my things?" I asked quietly. "Safe and sound," Kevin said. We packed everything up nice and neat. Pack them where? Kevin and Harold exchanged a look. "Garage," Kevin said finally. "Everything's labeled and organized. You should be grateful we took such good care of your stuff." Grateful. The word hit me like a slap. I'd been gone 3 weeks helping my old Army buddy Tommy Rodriguez through his final cancer treatments at the Dallas VA. 3 weeks holding his hand through the worst nights, making sure he didn't die alone and scared. And while I was doing my duty as a friend and a veteran, these two had staged a coup in my own home. "I want to see," I said. "See what?" "My things. In the garage." Harold laughed, actually laughed. "Sure thing, Boarder. Check out your new accommodations." Boarder. That word would echo in my head for months afterward. I walked through the house I'd bought in 1988, when I was 25 years old and fresh out of the Army. Every nail in the walls, every tile on the floor, every inch of crown molding. I'd installed it all myself, working nights and weekends while building my construction business during the day. This wasn't just a house. It was my life's work. The garage door opened to reveal a nightmare. Dozens of cardboard boxes stacked against the walls, creating narrow pathways through what had been my workshop. My tools, thousands of dollars worth of professional-grade equipment accumulated over 37 years, crammed into corners like junk. My workbench, where I'd built Sarah's dollhouse when she was 8, where I'd restored her rocking horse, where I'd crafted the jewelry box I gave her on her wedding day, now buried under Harold's golf clubs and Kevin's gaming equipment. I picked up the nearest box, Walt's Army uniforms written in Sarah's handwriting. The box next to it, Walt's photos. Inside that one, I found my framed pictures scattered like garbage. Sarah's high school graduation photo with a crack running right through her smile. My Purple Heart citation wrinkled and bent. The photo of my late wife Ellen holding baby Sarah in the hospital. The glass completely shattered. My hands shook as I lifted Ellen's picture. We'd been married 15 years before the cancer took her, when Sarah was only 12. I'd raised that girl alone, working double shifts to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Coached her soccer team, helped with homework every night, walked her down the aisle at her wedding, while wishing Ellen could have been there to see how beautiful our daughter looked. "Found everything okay?" Sarah's voice came from behind me, soft and nervous. I turned around, still holding the broken picture frame. My daughter stood in the garage doorway, twisting her wedding ring the way she always did when she was anxious. At 38, she still looked young to me, still looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when thunder scared her at night. Sarah, I held up the damaged photo. Your mother's picture is broken, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't step forward. Dad, I'm sorry about the glass. We tried to be careful, but what? But you decided to pack up my life without asking? But you gave away my bedroom to Harold without a phone call? Kevin said you'd understand. He said you travel so much anyway. And Harold really needs... I don't travel, Sarah. I was helping Tommy die with dignity. There's a difference. Kevin appeared behind her, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. Let's not make this dramatic, Walt. It's just sleeping arrangements. The garage has electricity heat. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable? I looked around at my life in boxes, at my workshop destroyed, at my tools treated like trash. You think this is about comfort? It's about practicality, Harold called. From the house. I'm 69 years old with a bad back. I need the master bedroom. You're still young enough to rough it. Young enough to rough it. At 62, after 37 years of mortgage payments, after raising Sarah alone, after building this place with my own hands, I was supposed to rough it in my own garage. I set down Ellen's broken picture very carefully and reached into my jacket pocket. I'd stopped at the bank before leaving Dallas, withdrawing $4,500 in cash, money I'd been saving to help Sarah and Kevin with whatever they needed next. The roof had some loose shingles on the south side, and I'd planned to hire a crew to fix it before summer. I brought money for the roof repair, I said, holding out the envelope. Kevin took it before Sarah could react. Didn't even look inside, just tucked it into his back pocket like I'd handed him spare change. Great. We'll put it to good use. Harold's medical bills have been piling up. Harold's medical bills, with my money, for the man sleeping in my bed. That's when it hit me. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't some emergency arrangement while Harold got back on his feet. This was permanent. They'd moved me into the garage and moved Harold into my bedroom, and they expected me to just accept it. To pay for the privilege of being treated like a tenant in my own home. I looked at Sarah one more time. Tell me you didn't agree to this. She couldn't meet my eyes. Kevin handles the house decisions now, Dad. He knows what's best. Kevin handles the house decisions. In the house I'd owned for 37 years. In the house I'd bought when Kevin was still in elementary school. In the house where my name was on every document, every utility bill, every insurance policy. I see, I said quietly. I picked up my duffel bag and walked toward my car. As I loaded it into the trunk, Kevin stepped outside. Where are you going? Motel. Give you folks some space to enjoy your new arrangement. His expression shifted to something like relief. Probably for the best. Less tension for everyone. Less tension. I was the source of tension in my own home. As I drove away, I saw Harold in the master bedroom window, watching me leave with that same satisfied smile. Kevin had his arm around Sarah's shoulders, both of them relaxed now that the problem had been removed. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd forgotten that I wasn't just some old man they could push around. I was a combat engineer who'd spent 8 years in the Army learning how structures work, how to identify weaknesses, how to take things apart piece by piece until they collapsed exactly when and how you wanted them to. And I knew exactly how to dismantle what they thought they'd built. The Lone Star Motel on Mockingbird Lane wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, cracked parking lot, the kind of place where people landed when life kicked them in the teeth. But the weekly rate was reasonable, and the desk clerk didn't ask questions when I said I'd be staying. Indefinitely. Room 127 smelled like disinfectant and old cigarettes. The carpet had seen better decades, and the air conditioning wheezed like a dying horse. But it had a bed, a bathroom, and most importantly, it had quiet. No Harold's booming laugh echoing through the walls. No Kevin's entitled demands. No sound of my own daughter choosing her husband's comfort over her father's dignity. I spread my documents across the narrow desk under the flickering fluorescent light. House deed, mortgage satisfaction letter, insurance policies, utility bills, everything that proved ownership of 428 Maple Street, Dallas, Texas. The papers looked smaller here, less impressive on cheap laminate than they had in my mind, but the words were crystal clear. Walter James Patterson, sole owner. I'd bought that house in 1988, with a $15,000 down payment I'd saved during my Army years. 25 years old, fresh out of the Corps of Engineers, ready to build something permanent after 8 years of temporary barracks and deployment housing. The mortgage company had looked at my construction job and my military record and approved me for $145,000. It felt like a fortune then. Now the house was worth $320,000, and every cent of that equity belonged to me. I pulled out my old calculator, the one I'd used for construction estimates since the 90s. The numbers told a story Kevin and Harold had conveniently ignored. Original loan, $130,000. Monthly payment, 9.87. Total payments over 30 years, 320. Final payment made, March 2018, right after my 55th birthday. I'd thrown a small party with Sarah and the grandkids, Lucy and Tyler. Kevin hadn't come, some work obligation he couldn't miss. Work obligation. Kevin hadn't held a steady job in the 5 years I'd known him. He did gig work, delivered food sometimes, picked up odd construction jobs when his buddies needed extra hands. But mostly he lived off Sarah's part-time income and my generosity. I'd covered their mortgage for 6 months when they lost their apartment. I'd paid for Tyler's emergency room visit when he broke his arm. I'd bought Lucy's school clothes last fall when money was tight. And this was how they repaid me. My phone buzzed. Text message from Sarah. Dad, where are you staying? The kids are asking about Grandpa. I stared at the message for a long time. Lucy was 9 now. Tyler was 7. They'd been living in my house since they were 4 and 2, respectively. To them, Grandpa's house was just home. They probably didn't understand why Grandpa suddenly wasn't there anymore. I didn't respond to Sarah's text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching. Texas property law, eviction process, Texas, landlord-tenant rights, Dallas County. The first thing I learned was encouraging. Texas favored property owners more than most states. If you owned the property and wanted someone out, the law was generally on your side. The second thing I learned was more complicated. Kevin and Sarah weren't technically tenants because they'd never paid rent or signed a lease. They were what the law called occupants, family members I'd allowed to stay. That changed everything. I scrolled through legal websites until my eyes burned, found articles about guests overstaying welcome and family member eviction. The process was different from regular tenant eviction, but it was possible. I'd need proper legal notice, documentation of ownership, and patience for the court system. Around midnight, I found what I was looking for. Sullivan and Associates, real estate law. The website showed a professional-looking woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair. She hadn't bothered to dye. Dorothy Sullivan, 35 years specializing in property disputes and family law matters. Her bio was straightforward. I believe in practical solutions to complex problems. Practical solutions. That's what I needed. I closed the laptop and tried to sleep, but my mind kept racing. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear someone's TV, voices from late-night talk shows, the occasional car door slamming in the parking lot. Normal sounds of people living their lives, going about their business, not having their own families turn against them. I thought about Ellen, wondered what she'd say about this situation. She'd always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises. But she'd also been fierce when it came to protecting what was ours. When the neighbor's dog kept digging under our fence, Ellen had marched over there and read them the riot act. When Sarah's first grade teacher tried to put her in a slower reading group, Ellen had fought until they moved her to advanced placement. Ellen wouldn't have stood for Harold in our bedroom. She wouldn't have tolerated Kevin's disrespect or Sarah's spineless enabling. She'd have told them all exactly where they could go and how fast they could get there. But Ellen had been gone for 27 years now, and I'd been handling everything alone. Maybe I'd been too accommodating, too willing to keep the peace for Sarah's sake. Maybe I'd trained them to expect my compliance by always being reasonable, always putting family harmony ahead of my own needs. Well, family harmony was officially dead. I must have dozed off around 3 a.m. because I woke to sunlight streaming through the polyester curtains. My back ached from the saggy mattress, but my mind was clear for the first time in weeks. I knew exactly what I had to do. After a shower that barely produced lukewarm water, I dressed in my best khakis and a button-down shirt. Not construction clothes, business clothes. I was about to become a plaintiff in a legal case, and I needed to look the part. Sullivan and Associates occupied the second floor of a modern building on Elm Street, not far from downtown Dallas. The elevator was slow but quiet, and the hallway carpet was clean and professional. The office door gleamed with fresh polish, and the nameplate read, Dorothy Sullivan, attorney at law, in simple brass letters. The receptionist was young and efficient, the kind who protected her boss from time wasters and troublemakers. She looked up from her computer with polite skepticism. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" I held up my folder of documents. "No, but I need to speak with Ms. Sullivan about property law. It's urgent." "She's booked until 2 p.m. I can schedule you for tomorrow morning. I have 15 minutes before my next appointment." The voice came from an inner office. Dorothy Sullivan stepped into the lobby, and her photograph hadn't done her justice. She was probably 58, wore a navy suit that suggested competence without trying for intimidation, and her eyes assessed me in the time it took to cross the room. "Mr. Patterson, Walt Patterson." "Come in, Mr. Patterson." Her office was organized but comfortable. Law degrees from SMU covered one wall, Texas bar certification beside them. A single photograph sat on the credenza. A younger woman in her 30s smiling in front of what looked like the Colorado mountains. Her daughter, probably. Dorothy gestured to a leather chair across from her desk. "Tell me the situation, just facts. Who owns what? Who lives where? What happened when?" I started to explain about coming home from the VA hospital, about finding my things in boxes, about Harold in my bathrobe, but she held up a hand. "Start with the property." "When did you acquire it? Is anyone else on the title?" Her interruption was gentle but firm. She wanted foundation before emotion, facts before feelings. I liked that immediately. I bought it in 1988, paid it off in 2018, only my name on everything. Dorothy pulled a legal pad toward her and wrote quickly. "Your family lives there now?" "My daughter, her husband, their 2 kids, and now his father. They moved my belongings to the garage while I was caring for a dying friend." She looked up from her notes, and something in her expression shifted. Still professional, but with an edge of understanding that told me she'd seen this before. "Mr. Patterson," she said quietly, "you have perfect legal standing. This isn't complicated, but it won't be easy." Dorothy Sullivan's law office occupied the 7th floor of a glass building in downtown Dallas that had probably been impressive in the 1990s. The elevator was slow, the hallway carpet showed wear patterns, but the door to Sullivan and Associates gleamed with fresh polish. Someone here cared about first impressions. The receptionist looked up from her computer as I entered. Young, efficient, with the kind of protective instincts that told me her boss was worth protecting. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" I held up my manila folder stuffed with documents. "No, but I need to speak with Ms. Sullivan about property law. It's urgent. She's booked until 2:30. I can schedule. I have 15 minutes before my next client." The voice came from an interior doorway. Dorothy Sullivan stepped into the lobby, and Jim Morrison's description hadn't done her justice. She stood maybe 5'7", wore a navy suit that suggested competence without trying to intimidate, and her eyes assessed me in the time it took to cross the room. Gray hair she hadn't tried to hide with dye, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, handshake firm enough to crack walnuts. "Come in, Mr. Patterson." Walt Patterson. Her office was organized but not sterile. Law degree from UT and SMU covered one wall. Texas State Bar certificate hung beside them. A single photograph sat on the credenza. A younger woman, maybe 35, smiling in front of what looked like the Boston Harbor. Her daughter, probably. The desk held neat stacks of folders, a laptop, and a coffee mug with a faded logo that read, "World's Most Tenacious Attorney." I liked her already. She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk, sat in her own, leaned forward slightly. "Tell me the situation. Just facts. Who owns what? Who lives where? What happened when?" I started with the basics. House purchased 1988, mortgage paid off 2018, sole ownership. Sarah married Kevin in 2016, moved in during 2020 claiming it was temporary, no lease, no rent payments, all utilities in my name. "Stop there," Dorothy said, making notes on a legal pad. "When you say temporary, was there any written agreement about duration?" "Nothing written. Kevin lost his job. Said they needed a few months to get back on their feet. That was 5 years ago?" "Yes." She wrote something else. "Continue." I told her about the VA hospital, coming home to find Harold in my bedroom, my belongings in the garage, Kevin's attitude, Sarah's compliance, Harold calling me a boarder in my own house. Dorothy pulled a calculator toward her, punched in some numbers. Mr. Patterson, in Texas, if someone lives in a property for more than 30 days without a written lease, they become what we call tenants at will. But since you're the sole owner and they pay no rent, we have more options. I spread my documents across her conference table. She moved through them methodically, using post-it notes to mark key papers, making annotations on her legal pad. Her efficiency was remarkable. No wasted movement, no unnecessary questions. House deed, sole ownership, she said, examining the documents. Mortgage satisfaction dated 2018. Utility bills for 24 months, all in your name. Bank statements showing all payments from your account. She straightened, crossed her arms. Mr. Patterson, this is textbook perfect. They have no lease, no tenant rights under Texas law, no legal claim to occupancy. So, I can just change the locks? Not quite that simple. Texas requires proper notice even for non-paying occupants. But we can serve a 30-day notice to quit. And if they don't comply, we file for forcible detainer through the Justice of the Peace Court. She moved to a whiteboard mounted on her wall, picked up a blue marker, drew 3 boxes connected by arrows. Step 1, 30-day notice to quit, properly served by constable. Step 2, if they don't comply, we file forcible detainer action. Step 3, court hearing, judgment, and sheriff's eviction if necessary. How long does all that take? If they cooperate after the notice, 30 days. If they fight it and we have to go to court, maybe 60 days total. But Mr. Patterson, with your documentation, this is the strongest case I've seen all year. I pulled out my checkbook. What's this going to cost me? Flat fee of $3,500 for the full process, plus court costs if we have to file. Half now, half when they vacate. I wrote the check for $150 without hesitation. Dorothy watched me sign it, then leaned back in her chair. Mr. Patterson, I have to ask, are you prepared for the fallout? Family situations like this can get ugly. They'll probably claim you're being cruel to your grandchildren, try to make you the villain on social media. Let me ask you something, Miss Sullivan. If your daughter's husband packed up your belongings and gave your bedroom to his father without asking, what would you do? A slight smile crossed her face. I'd have served the eviction notice myself. Then you understand. I do. But I want to be clear about something else. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Relationships will be damaged, possibly permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Harold's smug grin, Kevin's sense of entitlement, Sarah's inability to stand up for what was right. Ms. Sullivan, those relationships are already damaged. I'm just refusing to pretend they're not. She stood, walked to her window overlooking downtown Dallas. I had a similar situation 3 years ago. My son thought he could manipulate me into signing over my practice to him, said I was getting too old, losing my edge, couldn't be trusted with important clients anymore. What did you do? She turned back to face me. I fought him in court, brought in expert witnesses, client testimonials, evidence of my competency. I won the case, kept my practice, and haven't spoken to him since. Any regrets? Only that I didn't act sooner. She returned to her desk, pulled out a pre-printed form. I'll have the notice prepared this afternoon, notarized tomorrow, served Monday morning. That starts your 30 days. After service, you direct all communication from them to me. No conversations, no explanations, no negotiations. None. The legal process speaks for itself. Anything you say to them now can only hurt your case. I stood to leave, shook her hand again. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Call me Dorothy. And Mr. Patterson, you're doing the right thing. Family doesn't mean accepting abuse. It means expecting better. Monday morning, I sat in a Starbucks on Greenville Avenue, watching the clock like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. At 10:30 a.m., Constable Martinez was supposed to serve the eviction notice on Kevin at my house. Dorothy had recommended Martinez specifically, a no-nonsense guy who'd been serving legal papers for 15 years and didn't take attitude from anyone. My coffee went cold while I stared at my phone. I'd ordered a second cup, just to justify taking up table space, but Couldn't taste either one. Every few minutes, I checked the time. 10:15, 10:22, 10:28. At 10:47, my phone buzzed with a text. Notice served to Kevin Patterson. Signed receipt attached. Subject was cooperative. Martinez. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. The 30-day clock had officially started ticking. What I didn't see, what Martinez told me later when I called for details, was Kevin's reaction when he opened the front door. He'd been eating breakfast, still in pajama pants and an old t-shirt, irritated at being interrupted. Legal notice for Kevin Patterson and all occupants of this residence, Martinez had said, holding out the official document. Kevin glanced at the papers and actually laughed. This is a joke, right? That old man thinks he can evict us from our own home? Sir, whether you think it's valid doesn't affect the legal timeline. Please sign here acknowledging receipt. Kevin had signed, still smiling, confident in his dismissal. Martinez said he heard Kevin reading the notice aloud to someone inside, his voice dripping with theatrical mockery. 30-day notice to quit and deliver possession. He's completely lost his mind. That confidence lasted about 4 hours. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered cautiously. Mr. Patterson, this is Dan Richardson. I'm an attorney and a friend of Kevin's. He just showed me the eviction notice you served, and I wanted to call to suggest we discuss terms before this goes any further. There are no terms. The notice stands. Mr. Patterson, I understand you're upset, but throwing your own daughter and grandchildren out on the street seems extreme. Perhaps we could work out some kind of arrangement. I hung up before he could finish. Kevin was already calling in favors, trying to find someone to intimidate me into backing down. Dorothy had warned me this would happen. At 6:30 p.m., Kevin showed up at the Budget Inn. I heard him before I saw him. Heavy footsteps on the outdoor walkway, the kind of deliberate stomp meant to intimidate. He pounded on my door with the side of his fist, rattling the cheap frame. I opened it, but didn't invite him in. Forced him to have this conversation where other guests could hear every word. Walt, come on. Let's talk about this like reasonable people. We're past talking. You had your chance to be reasonable when you packed my belongings without permission. His mask of civility slipped slightly. You'd really throw out your own daughter? Your grandchildren? I'm enforcing my property rights. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. My father has serious health problems. You know this. Then find him appropriate care. That's not my responsibility. Kevin stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. I didn't move back. 8 years in the Army and 37 years in construction don't make you easy to push around. You do this, and you'll never see Lucy and Tyler again. Ever. The threat hung in, the air between us. Kevin was using my grandchildren as weapons, betting that my love for them would override my need for justice. Then you'll never see the inside of that house again after April 30th. Your choice. His face flushed red. Sarah will hate you for this. Sarah made her choice when she let you treat me like a stranger in my own home. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for weakness, finding none. Then he turned and walked away, each footstep deliberate on the concrete. I closed the door and waited. The call came 90 minutes later. Dad? Sarah's voice was thick with tears. Please! The kids are asking why Grandpa is making them move. Put Kevin on speaker, Sarah. Shuffling sounds, then Kevin's voice, clear and cold. We're not leaving, Walt. You'll have to drag us out, and when you do, everyone will see what kind of grandfather you really are. The court will handle the dragging if necessary. Harold's voice came through, sharp and venomous. You senile old fool! You think you can intimidate us with legal papers? I've been dealing with landlords longer than you've been alive. I'm not your landlord, Harold. I'm the homeowner, and you're trespassing. I hung up before he could respond. The phone rang immediately. Kevin's number. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A third time. Declined. A text arrived. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I deleted it without responding. Another text from Sarah. How could you do this to your own family? Mom would be ashamed. That one hit harder than Kevin's threats. But I thought about Ellen, about the woman who'd raised Sarah to be independent and strong. Ellen would have been ashamed, all right. Ashamed of the daughter who'd let her husband walk all over her father. I deleted that message too and turned off my phone. That evening, I drove past the house. Kevin's car was in the driveway, along with two others I didn't recognize. Probably friends or family members called in for an emergency strategy session. Through the living room window, I could see people gathered around my dining table, animated conversations, lots of hand gestures. They were planning their counterattack, but they had made one fundamental mistake. They thought this was a negotiation, a family dispute that could be resolved with enough pressure and guilt. They didn't understand that I'd already made my decision. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about principle. It was about a 62-year-old man refusing to be treated like a charity case in his own home. The 30-day countdown had begun. In 29 days, they'd either be gone voluntarily or the Harris County Sheriff's Department would remove them. Either way, I was getting my house back. The Facebook post went live at 8:30 the next morning. I know the exact time because that's when my phone started buzzing with notifications I couldn't ignore. Sarah had tagged me in a photo of Lucy and Tyler sitting on the front porch steps, both kids looking down at the camera with exaggerated sad expressions. Lucy held a cardboard sign that read, "Please don't make us homeless," Grandpa in crayon letters. Tyler clutched his stuffed dinosaur, the one I'd bought him for his 5th birthday. The caption made my stomach turn. Heartbroken that my children are being forced from their home by their grandfather. We're trying to care for Kevin's elderly father while dealing with this eviction. Please send prayers for our family during this difficult time. Family. First. Homelessness and prayers. Within an hour, the post had 47 comments. I read them all, each one a knife twist. So sorry, Sarah. Family should support each other, not tear each other apart. Praying for you and those beautiful babies. Some people forget what family means. Can't believe a grandfather would do this. Those poor children. The worst part was seeing names I recognized. Mrs. Martinez from 3 houses down, who'd brought casseroles after Ellen died. Tommy Rodriguez's widow Maria, who I'd helped move furniture just last month. Pete Williams from my old construction crew, who'd worked under me for 8 years. All of them judging me based on half a story. All of them assuming I was the villain because Sarah knew exactly how to frame the narrative. My phone rang. Jim Morrison's name on the caller ID. "Walt, what the hell is going on? My wife just showed me Sarah's Facebook post." "It's complicated, Jim." "Complicated? You're evicting your own daughter? That's what this is about?" I explained the whole situation again. The VA hospital, coming home to find Harold in my bed, my belongings in boxes, Kevin's attitude. Jim listened, but I could hear the doubt in his silence. "Jesus, Walt. Maybe you could have handled this differently. Talked it through, set some boundaries without lawyers. I tried talking, they packed my life away while I was helping Tommy die. But eviction? That's pretty nuclear. Jim wasn't the first friend to call. Over the next 2 days, I heard from people I hadn't spoken to in months, all of them concerned about Sarah's post, all of them gently suggesting I might be overreacting. The second post appeared, thus, Wednesday evening. This one showed Harold sitting in a wheelchair. When had he gotten a wheelchair? Looking frail and worried. Sarah's caption read, "Facing homelessness at 69 with serious health conditions. Where is the compassion? Where is the humanity? Elder abuse, or heartbroken elder abuse." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah was painting me as someone who threw sick old men out on the street for sport. I called Dorothy immediately. "I saw the posts," she said, before I could speak. "This is standard procedure for family evictions. Make the other side look like a monster. Generate sympathy. Hope public pressure forces you to back down. People I've known for decades are commenting, calling me heartless. Walt, you can't win a trial on Facebook. Social media isn't a court of law. It's a popularity contest, and whoever tells the most sympathetic story wins. So, what do I do? Nothing. You don't respond, you don't defend yourself, you don't engage. Let them have their social media victory. We'll have our legal victory." But staying silent was harder than I'd expected. Thursday afternoon, I needed groceries, basic stuff, bread, milk, coffee. I chose the H-E-B on Beltline Road, hoping to avoid neighbors from my immediate area. No such luck. In the produce section, I ran into Carol Hendricks from my old church. We'd served on the building committee together, planned 3 fundraisers, shared dozens of Sunday morning conversations. Walt. Her voice was cold, disappointed. I saw what Sarah posted. Those poor children. Carol, there's more to the situation than... I never thought you'd be that kind of grandfather. Never thought you'd put your own comfort before your family's needs." She was already walking away, shaking her head. "There's always another way, Walt. Always." I abandoned my shopping cart in the dairy aisle and left. That evening, I sat in the motel room reading the latest comments on Sarah's posts. The numbers had grown. 73 comments on the first post, 58 on the second. People sharing their own stories about family members who had helped them through tough times. People expressing outrage that anyone would evict their own blood. A new post had appeared. A photo of Lucy's school backpack with a note attached. Lucy's teacher says she's been crying in class, worried about where she'll live. How do I explain that Grandpa doesn't want us anymore? Heartbroken, Wanjushbai's innocent children. I stared at that post for a long time. Lucy crying at school, my 8-year-old granddaughter thinking her grandfather didn't love her anymore because her parents were using her as a weapon in their manipulation campaign. I started typing a response 3 different times, started to explain about the 5 years of free housing, about coming home to find my belongings packed away, about Harold's attitude and Kevin's sense of entitlement. Each time, I deleted what I'd written. Dorothy was right. Social media wasn't a courtroom. Facts didn't matter here, only feelings. And a 62-year-old man standing up for his property rights would never be as sympathetic as 2 crying children and a sick old man in a wheelchair. But lying there in that motel bed, looking at my granddaughter's school backpack in a Facebook photo designed to make me look like a monster, I made myself a promise. When this was over, when I had my house back, when the legal victory was complete, I'd make sure Lucy and Tyler knew the truth. Not the social media version, not their parents' manipulation, but the real truth about why their grandfather had to fight for his own dignity. They deserved to know that standing up for yourself wasn't cruelty. They deserve to learn that sometimes the hardest thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to enable their worst behavior, even when that someone is your own daughter, and even when the whole world is watching, ready to judge every move you make. 2 weeks into the eviction period, it became clear that Kevin and Sarah weren't planning to leave voluntarily. Sarah's Facebook posts continued daily. Photos of the kids doing homework by lamplight, Harold looking increasingly frail in his wheelchair, updates about their desperate search for affordable housing that always came up empty. Dorothy and I met at her office on a Thursday afternoon to discuss next steps. "They're dug in," she said, pulling up the latest court filings on her laptop. Kevin's attorney filed a response claiming constructive eviction and demanding a jury trial. It's a stall tactic, but it'll add 2 to 3 weeks to the process. So, what do we do? Dorothy leaned back in her chair, studying me. "We have legal options to increase pressure. You're the account holder on all utilities. We can request service reductions while the case is pending." "You mean cut off their power?" "Not completely. Texas law requires minimum service for safety. But we can reduce it to essentials only, enough electricity for refrigeration and basic lighting. Nothing for entertainment or comfort." I thought about Kevin and Harold watching football in my master bedroom, about the kids streaming cartoons on tablets they had bought with my money, about Sarah running the dryer constantly because she'd never learned to plan ahead. Do it. The cable company was first. I called from Dorothy's office, put them on speaker so she could take notes. "Reason for disconnection?" the representative asked. "Property dispute. I'm no longer residing there and want all non-essential services discontinued. Will someone else be taking over the account? No. Complete disconnection effective immediately." The electric company required more paperwork. I couldn't shut off power entirely due to safety regulations, but I could request reduction to minimum essential service. That meant refrigerator, stove, and 1 light fixture per room. No air conditioning, no entertainment systems, no convenience appliances. "Service reduction will take effect Monday," the customer service rep confirmed. "You'll receive an email confirmation within 24 hours. Friday evening, my phone started ringing. Kevin's number. I let it go to voicemail. "Walt, what did you do?" "The cable's dead. Internet's gone. How are the kids supposed to do their homework?" I deleted the message without responding. Saturday brought more calls. Sarah this time, her voice high and panicked. "Dad, please. Lucy has a school project due Monday and needs to research online. Can't you turn the internet back on just for the weekend?" I almost called her back. The grandfather and me wanted to fix this, wanted to make sure Lucy got her project done, But the homeowner in me remembered Harold's smug face, remembered Kevin calling me a boarder, remembered my cracked photographs thrown in boxes. I didn't return the call. Monday afternoon, Kevin showed up at the Budget Inn again. This time, he brought reinforcements. 2 guys I didn't recognize, probably. Friends he'd called for backup. They stood by his car while he approached my door, trying to look intimidating. I opened the door, but kept the security chain latched. "The power's barely working," he said through the gap. "It's 95 degrees today, and we have no air conditioning. Minimum essential service. Check your lease for HVAC provisions. We don't have a lease, and you know it. Exactly. Tenants with leases have rights. Guests can be asked to leave any time." His face flushed red. "Harold's having breathing problems. He needs cool air. Then find him appropriate housing with adequate climate control." "This is elderly abuse. I'm calling Adult Protective Services. Feel free. They'll want to see Harold's lease agreement and proof he's been paying rent." "Oh, wait. Neither of those exist." I closed the door and waited for him to leave. Through the window, I watched him pace back and forth for 10 minutes, talking animatedly with his backup crew. Finally, they drove away. That evening, Dorothy called with an update. Adult Protective Services contacted my office. "Kevin filed a complaint claiming you're endangering Harold by cutting off air conditioning." My heart sank. "Are they investigating?" They were, until I sent them copies of the property deed and eviction notice. Turns out APS doesn't get involved in landlord-tenant disputes where the victim is unlawfully occupying someone else's property. Relief flooded through me. "So we're clear?" "Completely. But, Walt, Kevin's getting desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. Be careful." She was right to warn me. That night, I drove past the house around 10 p.m. Every window was dark except for a single light in what used to be my workshop. I could see Harold's silhouette moving around in there, probably trying to find a cooler space to sleep. Kevin's car wasn't in the driveway, but Sarah's was. I wondered where he'd gone, what new scheme he was cooking up. I got my answer the next morning when Dorothy forwarded me an email. Kevin had contacted 3 different news stations, claiming his story was perfect for an investigative piece on elder abuse and family housing disputes. Channel 8 had responded, asking for more details. "He's going to the media," I told Dorothy over the phone. "Good, let him. We have documentation, legal standing, and the moral high ground. Kevin has a sob story and some manipulated photos. Reporters aren't stupid, Walt. They'll ask hard questions he can't answer, such as why a healthy 40-year-old man with no disabilities can't support his own family, such as why they never paid rent in 5 years of occupancy, such as where Harold was living before he conveniently needed emergency housing right when you left town." I thought about the last point. Harold's apartment flooding had happened awfully conveniently, right when I was unreachable at the VA hospital. How long had they been planning this takeover? "Dorothy, what if Harold's housing crisis was manufactured? What if they planned this while I was gone?" Then Kevin's about to discover that conspiracy to commit fraud isn't a good look on television. That afternoon, I received an email from Channel 8 News requesting an interview about my eviction of family members, including elderly father-in-law and minor children. I forwarded it to Dorothy without responding. "Let me handle media contact," she replied. "You focus on staying strong. We're 16 days into the notice period. 2 more weeks and this nightmare is over." 2 more weeks felt like a lifetime, but I could wait. After 37 years of building something worth fighting for, I could certainly wait 14 more days to claim it back. The Harris County Justice of the Peace Courthouse on Wallaceville Road looked like every other government building built in the 1980s. Beige brick, small windows, and the kind of institutional lighting that made everyone look guilty. But walking through those doors on August 15th felt like approaching the finish line of a marathon I'd been running for 4 months. Dorothy wore her best navy suit, carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy with evidence, and moved through the courthouse like she owned it. We'd spent the previous evening at her office, organizing documents, preparing for Kevin's likely testimony, running through every possible scenario. "Remember," she'd told me, "answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate, don't justify, don't explain your feelings. Just facts." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Judge Patricia Williams presided, a black woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. Dorothy had researched every judge in the rotation and told me Williams was exactly who we wanted. Fair, efficient, and immune to sob stories. Kevin sat at the defendant's table with his strip mall lawyer, Martin Webb. Webb wore an ill-fitting suit and shuffled papers nervously. Kevin looked confident, though, kept glancing at the gallery where Sarah sat with Lucy and Tyler. Smart move, bringing the kids. Made me look like the heartless grandfather throwing innocent children onto the street. Harold wasn't present. Conveniently, he'd been hospitalized the night before, with breathing problems, according to Sarah's latest Facebook post. The timing was suspicious, but it didn't matter legally. Case number CV 2025-08847. Patterson versus Patterson, the bailiff called. Forcible detainer action. Judge Williams looked up from her files. Counselors, this is an eviction proceeding, not family court. I want to hear about legal standing, lease agreements, and property rights. I don't want to hear about hurt feelings or family dynamics. Are we clear? Webb stood for opening arguments, immediately violating the judge's instructions. Your Honor, my clients are victims of a vindictive eviction by a bitter old man who's angry about normal family living arrangements. Mr. Patterson cut off utilities to freeze out his own daughter and grandchildren in 95-degree heat. Judge Williams held up her hand. Counselor, who owns the property in question? Webb fumbled with his papers. Well, the plaintiff technically, but the emotional context. The emotional context is irrelevant. Who owns the property? Mr. Patterson, but thank you. Ms. Sullivan, please proceed. Dorothy stood slowly, placed a single document on the overhead projector. The original deed from 1988, my name embossed clear as daylight on the ownership line. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Walter Patterson purchased this property in 1988, paid off the mortgage in 2018, and has been sole owner for 37 years. In March 2025, he returned from caring for a terminally ill veteran to find his belongings packed in the garage and his bedroom occupied by the defendant's father without permission or prior notice. She clicked through slides methodically. Each one was a nail in Kevin's coffin. Bank statements showing 37 years of mortgage payments, all from my account. Utility bills spanning 2 years, all in my name. The properly served eviction notice dated April 1st. Photos of my belongings boxed in the garage, time-stamped and notarized. The defendant's response to this lawful eviction notice? They ignored it completely and filed this frivolous countersuit, claiming constructive eviction. Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. After they constructively evicted him from his own bedroom? Correct, Your Honor. Webb called Kevin to the witness stand. My son-in-law walked up confidently, settled into the chair like he was doing everyone a favor by appearing. Webb asked softball questions about family arrangements and shared living situations. Kevin painted himself as the caring son-in-law, helping his elderly father-in-law by managing household decisions. Then Dorothy stood for cross-examination. Mr. Patterson, how much rent did you pay monthly? We had a family arrangement. Yes or no, did you pay rent? Kevin's jaw tightened. No, but when you moved your father into Mr. Patterson's bedroom, did you obtain his permission? He was out of town taking care of his friend. That's not what I asked. Yes or no, did you obtain permission? Long pause. No. When you packed Mr. Patterson's belongings into the garage, did you inform him beforehand? Kevin glanced desperately at Webb, found no rescue there. No, but we were trying to help. Yes or no, answers only, please. Did you inform him? No. Dorothy presented evidence in sequence like dealing cards. The notary's affidavit about Kevin's initial mockery when served. Phone records showing Kevin's threatening calls after the eviction notice. Email confirmations of utility disconnections, all properly requested by the account holder. When I took the stand, Dorothy's questions were gentle but devastating. Mr. Patterson, when you returned from Dallas, where did you sleep that first night? In my garage, on the concrete floor, in the house you'd owned for 37 years? Yes. Did anyone apologize for this arrangement? No. My son-in-law told me those were the new house rules. Had you given permission for these new rules? I hadn't even been told they existed. The courtroom was silent except for the court reporters typing. Judge Williams reviewed Dorothy's evidence exhibits, taking her time with each document. Kevin whispered urgently to Webb. Sarah dabbed at her eyes with tissues, the grieving daughter act in full display for anyone watching. Lucy and Tyler sat quietly, probably not understanding why they were in a courtroom instead of at school. Judge Williams looked up finally. This court finds no merit whatsoever in the defendant's constructive eviction claim. Mr. Walter Patterson is sole owner of the property at 847 Maple Street. The defendants are occupants without lease, without rent payments, who denied the property owner access to his own residence. Kevin's face went white. The original eviction notice is hereby enforced. Defendants must vacate the premises within 72 hours and pay plaintiff $3,500 in court costs, plus $2,000 in compensatory damages for unlawful occupation. Webb started to object, but Judge Williams cut him off. Furthermore, if defendants are not voluntarily vacated within 72 hours, the Harris County Sheriff's Department is authorized to remove them and their belongings from the premises. The gavel came down with finality that echoed through the small courtroom. Kevin sat stunned. Webb gathered his papers, defeat written across his face. Sarah stood slowly, took the children's hands, and walked toward the exit without looking at me once. Outside on the courthouse steps, Dorothy finished a call with her office while I watched Kevin help Sarah load the kids into their car. He looked hollow, beaten. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "You won," Dorothy said, joining me. I nodded, but winning felt more complicated than I'd expected. 3 days after the court ruling, I stood in my driveway holding the key to my own front door. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same red brick, same white trim I'd painted 2 years ago, same oak tree in the front yard that I'd planted when Sarah was 10. But everything had changed. Dorothy pulled up behind me in her silver Honda, her car loaded with boxes from the extended stay hotel where I'd been living for 4 months. She'd insisted on helping me move back in, said she wanted to make sure there were no surprises waiting inside. The front door opened easily. Kevin had left it unlocked, probably hoping I'd walk into some kind of trap or confrontation. Instead, I walked into emptiness. The living room was stripped bare, not just of people but of everything that had made it feel like a family home. The family photos that had hung on the walls for decades, gone. Sarah's decorative pillows, the kids' toys scattered in corners, Kevin's sports memorabilia on the mantel, all vanished. Even the couch where Harold had held court every evening was missing. They took everything they could carry, Dorothy observed, setting down a box of my belongings. But no damage. That's smart. Destruction would have added criminal charges to their civil judgment. I walked through each room systematically. The master bedroom held only the furniture I'd bought 20 years ago. Bed frame, dresser, nightstands. My things, retrieved from the garage where Kevin had banished them. The kids' rooms were completely empty, not even a forgotten crayon on the floor. Harold's presence had been erased entirely. In the kitchen, a yellow sticky note on the counter caught my eye. Sarah's handwriting, rushed but legible. "Dad, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I need to say I was wrong." Kevin pushed and I let him. "I forgot who raised me and what you taught me about standing up for what's right. I'm sorry I chose his comfort over your dignity. The kids ask about you every day. I tell them Grandpa loves them, and I hope someday you'll believe I love you too. Your daughter always, Sarah." I read it twice, folded it carefully, tucked it in my wallet next to my driver's license. The first honest thing she'd said to me in months. Dorothy found me in my workshop, my reclaimed workshop. My tools were back on their proper pegboards, my workbench cleared of Harold's junk. Someone, probably Sarah, had taken care to put everything back exactly where it belonged. "How does it feel?" Dorothy asked. "Empty," I said honestly. "I fought so hard to get this back, and now it just feels quiet." She came to stand beside me at the workbench. "The quiet is good. It means the chaos is over." We spent the afternoon unpacking my life, putting things back where they belonged. Books on shelves, photographs on the mantel, my Army medals in their display case. Each item replaced was an act of reclamation, rebuilding my identity one piece at a time. Dorothy had brought groceries, practical things like milk, bread, eggs, but also a bottle of wine to mark the occasion. We cooked dinner together in my kitchen for the first time, pasta with marinara sauce. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a celebration. "What happens now?" I asked as we sat at my dining table, at the head where Harold used to hold court. "Now you live your life. You've got your house back. Kevin learned his lesson, and Sarah knows the cost of choosing the wrong side. And us?" Dorothy set down her wine glass, looked at me directly. "What do you want to happen with us?" Over the past 4 months, something had developed between Dorothy and me that went beyond attorney-client privilege. She'd seen me at my lowest point and stood by me anyway. She'd fought for me when my own family wouldn't. She understood what it meant to choose dignity over easy peace. "I want you to stay," I said simply. "Not just tonight. I want to see where this goes." She smiled, the first completely relaxed expression I'd seen from her since we'd met. "I was hoping you'd say that." We cleaned up dinner together, moving around my kitchen like we'd been doing it for years. Natural, comfortable, two people who'd found each other in the middle of a war zone. As we were finishing, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. "Grandpa, it's Lucy. Mom gave me her phone to write this. I miss you so much. Tyler misses you too. We don't understand why we had to move, but Mom says you still love us, and maybe we can see you soon. I hope that's true. Love, Lucy." I showed the message to Dorothy. She read it, handed the phone back without comment. I typed back, "I love you and Tyler more than all the stars in the sky. That will never change. Give me some time to work things out with your mom. Love, Grandpa." The response came immediately. Mom is reading this and crying happy tears. She says, "Maybe we can have lunch soon." I would like that very much. Dorothy squeezed my hand across the kitchen counter. "See, not all bridges have to stay burned." That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 4 months. The sheets were fresh. The room smelled like home instead of Harold's cheap cologne. And through the walls I heard nothing but peaceful silence. No Harold's television blaring until midnight. No Kevin's demands echoing through the hallway. No Sarah's apologetic footsteps trying to keep everyone happy at once. Just quiet. Just peace. Just the sound of my own house settling around me like a comfortable old jacket. I'd won more than a legal case. I'd won back my self-respect, my boundaries, and my right to be treated with dignity in my own home. At 62 years old, I'd learned it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And lying there in the dark, listening to Dorothy's breathing beside me, I realized I'd gained something I hadn't been looking for. I'd found someone who understood that fighting for what's right isn't always pretty, but it's always worth it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sarah and I had a relationship to rebuild. Lucy and Tyler deserved to know their grandfather. Kevin would have to learn to stand on his own feet without my support. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was exactly where I belonged. 6 weeks after reclaiming my house, I was working in my garage on a Saturday morning when Dorothy's car pulled into the driveway. She'd taken to stopping by on weekends, sometimes with groceries for dinner, sometimes just to check on how I was settling back in. Today she carried a manila envelope and wore the expression she got when discussing legal business. "Settlement check came through," she said, handing me the envelope. Kevin paid the $5,500 court judgment in full. Probably borrowed the money, but it's done. I opened the envelope and stared at the cashier's check. $5,500. It felt strange getting paid for my own suffering, but Dorothy had insisted that actions needed consequences. "What are you going to do with it?" I looked around my garage at the workbench where I'd been restoring an old rocking chair. Sarah's birthday is next month. I was thinking about making her something. Maybe use some of this. "Money to buy really good lumber," Dorothy smiled. "That's very generous considering. She's still my daughter. The note she left, that was the Sarah I raised. The rest was just Kevin's influence." "Have you heard from her lately?" "Text messages. Nothing deep, just checking if I'm okay. She's scared to call, I think. Scared I'll reject her the way she rejected me." It was true. Over the past month, Sarah had sent careful, tentative messages. "Thinking of you, Dad? Hope you're doing well. Kids ask about you every day." Each one felt like a small olive branch, testing whether I was ready for contact. I'd responded to all of them, kept my replies short but warm. "Doing fine. Take care of yourself. Tell the kids Grandpa loves them. Maybe we can talk soon." We were circling each other like wounded animals, both wanting connection but afraid of more hurt. "There's something else," Dorothy said, pulling a second envelope from her purse. "I got a call from a producer at Channel 8. They want to do a follow-up story about your case." "Follow-up to what?" "The original story never aired. Turns out when their reporter started digging into Kevin's claims, he found some interesting inconsistencies." I raised an eyebrow. Such as Harold's apartment never flooded. His landlord confirmed Harold broke his lease voluntarily in February, a full month before you left for the VA hospital. The emergency housing crisis was manufactured. The pieces clicked into place. They planned this while I was gone. Gets better. Kevin's been unemployed for 8 months, not 3 like he told the reporter. Harold had been living with another son in Oklahoma until they kicked him out for non-payment of rent. And Sarah's roof damage? The contractor says those shingles have been loose for 2 years, not a recent emergency. I sat down heavily on my workbench stool. The betrayal went deeper than I'd realized. This wasn't a series of unfortunate circumstances that spiraled out of control. It was a calculated plan to take over my house while I was unavailable to defend it. The reporter wants to interview you about elder financial abuse patterns, how adult children manipulate aging parents out of their assets. I'm not elderly, I said automatically. You're 62 with a paid-off house worth $320,000. To Kevin, that made you a target. The thought made me sick. What do you think I should do? I think you should tell your story. Not for revenge, but for other people in similar situations. You had the strength and resources to fight back. A lot of people don't. That afternoon, Dorothy and I drove to Sarah's new apartment across town. A modest 2-bedroom in a complex that had seen better days, but clean and safe. I'd found the address through Lucy's school records, emergency contact information that still listed me as grandparent. I knocked on the door, heard quick footsteps, then silence. Sarah was probably looking through the peephole, deciding whether to answer. The door opened slowly. Sarah stood there in jeans and a faded t-shirt, looking younger than her 38 years. Behind her, I could see Lucy and Tyler peeking around the corner. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hi, sweetheart. Can we talk? She nodded, stepped aside to let us in. The apartment was furnished with basics. A couch that had seen better days, a small dining table, kids' toys organized in careful piles. No big screen TV, no gaming systems, no expensive electronics. Reality had set in quickly once my support was withdrawn. Kids, say hi to Grandpa, Sarah said softly. Lucy ran to me immediately, wrapped her arms around my waist. Grandpa, I missed you so much. Tyler followed more cautiously, but accepted my hug when I knelt down to his level. Hi, buddy. How's first grade treating you? Good. Mom says we can't live in the big house anymore because you need your space back. Sarah flushed red. Tyler, go play in your room for a few minutes. Take Lucy with you. After the kids left, we sat at her small kitchen table. Sarah twisted her wedding ring, the same nervous habit she'd had since childhood. I owe you an apology, she said finally. A real one, not just a note. You do. Kevin convinced me you were being unreasonable. Said older people get set in their ways, resist change. He made it sound like we were helping you by taking over household management. And you believed that? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to believe it. Kevin was so confident, so sure he knew what was best. And Harold, he was charming at first, told stories about his construction days, acted like a grandfather figure for the kids. What changed? You left. The mask came off. Harold started treating me like hired help, demanding meals and laundry service. Kevin quit looking for work entirely, said managing your property was a full-time job. When you called about coming home, Kevin panicked, said we needed to establish dominance before you got back. Dominance. His word, not mine. I should have called you immediately, warned you what was happening. But I was scared of Kevin's reaction, scared of confrontation. I reached across the table, took her hand. Sarah, I raised you to be strong. What happened to that strength? I lost it somewhere along the way. Kevin has this way of making you doubt yourself, making you think his judgment is better than yours. Dorothy spoke for the first time since we'd arrived. That's called emotional manipulation. It's more common than people realize. Sarah looked at Dorothy gratefully. He isolated me from my friends, convinced me Dad was getting difficult in his old age, said I needed to choose between my husband and my father. So you chose him. I chose wrong. Sarah wiped her eyes with a napkin. The worst part is, the kids saw it all. Lucy asked me why we were being mean to Grandpa. Tyler wanted to know why Harold got the big bedroom and you had to sleep in the garage. I didn't have good answers. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. Sarah told me about the marriage counseling she'd started, about her job search, about the reality of supporting herself and 2 kids without my financial safety net. It wasn't easy, but she was learning to stand on her own feet for the first time in years. "Where's Kevin now?" I asked as we prepared to leave. "Living with Harold in a studio apartment in Garland. Turns out when Harold's paying half the rent, he's a lot less demanding about service and amenities." 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee for 3 people. Dorothy sat at the breakfast table reading the newspaper, her reading glasses perched on her nose, completely comfortable in what had become our shared space. Sarah sat across from her, helping Lucy with a math worksheet, while Tyler colored pictures of dinosaurs. It was Saturday morning, and this had become our routine. Sarah would bring the kids over for breakfast, we'd work on homework together, then I'd take them to the park while Sarah and Dorothy planned the week's logistics. Not the family I'd started with, but a better one. Stronger, more honest, built on respect instead of obligation. "Grandpa, can you help me with this word problem?" Lucy held up her worksheet. "It says, if Kevin has 12 apples and gives away 8, how many does he have left?" I almost choked on my coffee. "That's ironic." Sarah looked up from Tyler's coloring book. "What's ironic? Nothing, sweetheart." Let me look at that problem. The real Kevin, it turned out, had left Dallas 6 months ago. Harold's studio apartment had become too cramped for both of them, and Kevin's job prospects in construction had dried up after word spread about his attempt to steal my house. He'd moved to Austin, supposedly to start fresh, but according to Sarah's divorce attorney, he was living in his car and washing dishes at a casino. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you," Sarah said after we'd finished Lucy's homework. "The divorce papers came through yesterday." Dorothy looked up from her newspaper. "Congratulations. How do you feel? Relieved? Scared? Free?" Sarah twisted her bare ring finger where her wedding band used to be. "Kevin fought for half the settlement money from your case. Can you believe that? He tried to claim community property rights to money he had to pay because he illegally occupied someone else's house. Did he get it?" The judge laughed him out of court. "Turns out you can't claim community property on money awarded for your own misconduct." I reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "You're going to be fine. Better than fine." "I know. It's just scary, being completely on my own for the first time since I was 22. "You're not on your own," Dorothy said firmly. "You have us." That afternoon, while Sarah took the kids to a birthday party, Dorothy and I worked in the garden behind my house. I was building raised beds for vegetables. She was planning what to plant for fall harvest. Domestic tasks that felt remarkably satisfying after months of legal warfare. "Channel 8 wants to do a 1-year follow-up story," Dorothy said, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. "How are you feeling about that?" The original news story had aired 6 months ago, a 10-minute segment about elder financial abuse that used my case as the primary example. The response had been overwhelming. Dozens of calls from other seniors dealing with similar situations, requests for interviews from other news outlets, even an invitation to speak at a conference on family financial exploitation. "I think it's important," I said. "People need to know they don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from family members. And how do you want to end the story?" I thought about that question while I hammered steaks for bean poles. A year ago, I'd been sleeping on concrete in my own garage, wondering if I'd ever get my life back. Today I was planning next year's garden with a woman who understood my values, rebuilding a relationship with my daughter based on honesty instead of enabling, and watching my grandchildren grow up with respect for boundaries and consequences. I want to end it by saying that sometimes the best thing you can do for people you love is refuse to enable their worst behavior, even when it's hard, even when everyone else thinks you're being cruel. Dorothy stood up, brushed dirt off her knees. "And what about the power question?" "What power question?" "Kevin used to say he had all the power because he controlled access to your daughter and grandchildren. What would you tell him now?" I looked at my house, solid and peaceful in the afternoon sun. Looked at Dorothy, who'd chosen to build a life with me, not because she needed anything, but because she wanted to. Thought about Sarah, who was learning to be strong and independent for the first time in her adult life. Considered Lucy and Tyler, who now understood that their grandfather was someone who stood up for what was right, even when it cost him. I'd tell him that real power doesn't come from manipulation or threats or taking what doesn't belong to you. Real power comes from building something worth protecting, then having the courage to protect it, even if it means losing people, especially then. Because if someone only stays in your life when you let them walk all over you, they were never really in your life to begin with. That evening, after Sarah had picked up the kids and Dorothy had gone home to pack for a business trip, I sat on my back deck with a beer and my phone. I scrolled through Sarah's Facebook page, looking at recent photos. The posts were different now. Pictures of her and the kids hiking, Lucy's school art projects, Tyler learning to ride a bike. No manipulation, no victim narratives, just a woman documenting her real life. I typed a comment under a photo of Lucy reading a book, proud of you both. Love, Dad. The response came within minutes. Love you too, Dad. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to do the right thing. At 63 years old, I'd learned something valuable. Family isn't about blood or obligation or shared history. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and the willingness to do hard things when easy things would be wrong. The people who stayed in my life after I started demanding respect were the people worth keeping. The ones who left had done me a favor. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so good that the people who tried to tear you down become irrelevant to your happiness. That's how you show someone who really has the power